listener production.
Hi, it's Cassidy with you, and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Coming up in our deep dive, catastrophic bushfires tear through Victoria as warnings ramp up that Australia could be the new LA, facing more Black Summer level megafires if we don't act. We unpack why and what's to blame, but first, let's check the afternoon headlines. It's Friday, the 9th of January. While fires are tearing through Australia's south, Queenslanders have been told to prepare for the high chance of a tropical cyclone. A severe weather warning has been issued for North Queensland, putting residents across more than 1,000 kilometres of the coast at risk. A tropical low is sitting in the Coral Sea about 350 kilometres from Cairns and is expected to cross the coast north of Townsville late Saturday or early Sunday. The Bureau of Meteorology says there's a strong chance the tropical low will become a cyclone by tomorrow. Some isolated areas could receive up to half a metre of rain over the next 3 days, increasing the risk of flooding, landslides and road closures. After crossing the coast, the system could track south, bringing up to 35 millimetres of rain to Brisbane early next week, with authorities urging communities to stay alert, especially in areas already saturated by recent downpours. US federal immigration agents have shot 2 people in Portland just a day after an ICE officer killed 37-year-old Renee Nicole Good in Minneapolis. Portland police say a man and woman were taken to hospital with gunshot wounds. At the time of recording, their condition remains unknown. The Department of Homeland Security claims the pair were associated with the, quote, vicious Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua. However, those allegations have not been independently verified. The incident comes amid heightened tensions following the Minneapolis shooting, which has drawn criticism over federal agents' actions and questions about media coverage. Vice President J.D. Vance defended the Minneapolis officer, claiming Good was part of a broader left-wing network interfering with law enforcement, despite video evidence suggesting she was simply driving away.
He shot back. He defended himself. He's already been seriously wounded in law enforcement operations before, and everybody who's been repeating the lie that this is some innocent woman who was out for a drive in Minneapolis when a law enforcement officer shot at her, you should be ashamed of yourselves.
Minnesota Governor, Democrat Tim Walz, says authorities have been excluded from the investigation, with the FBI now leading the probe.
Now that Minnesota has been taken out of the investigation, it feels very, very difficult that we will get a fair outcome.
Authorities in Portland are urging calm as investigations continue. And one of Australia's deadliest spiders could soon be saving lives. Queensland researchers have developed a new drug made from funnel web spider venom that could dramatically reduce damage caused by heart attacks and strokes. The experimental treatment, known as IB409, works by preventing cells from dying during a cardiac arrest, something scientists say no existing drug can do. Researchers believe the venom-based compound can protect heart and brain tissue during heart attacks and strokes, and even keep organs alive for longer during transplants. For the first time, it's now being tested in humans, marking a major milestone in cardiovascular medicine. 48 healthy volunteers are taking part in the early-stage clinical trial, which has taken years to reach human testing. And if successful, the drug could be trialled in hospital patients and eventually used by paramedics and first responders. Now it's time to get into our deep dive on the threat of catastrophic megafires in Australia. It comes as firefighters are battling 2 emergency-level blazes in central Victoria, where homes have been destroyed and 3 people, including a child, remain unaccounted for. It's the worst conditions the country has faced since the deadly Black Summer bushfires that tore through Victoria in 2019 and 2020. Now, experts are warning that our risk of more frequent and severe fires will only get worse. Here to unpack this topic today is Dr. Paul Reid, climate criminologist and director of the Future Emergency Resilience Network. Dr. Reid, thanks so much for joining me. When we do talk about catastrophic bushfire conditions, what exactly are they and why are they so dangerous?
Catastrophic fire conditions are designated legally to indicate to the community that we need a whole range of responses put in place in order to make sure that the community is safe.
And so what kind of conditions, what are we seeing for something to be dubbed a catastrophic bushfire?
Well, we need high winds, we need a dry fuel load, and we need very high temperatures. We've got a dry fuel load at the moment because this is what often happens, is that in between the El Nino cycles in the Southern Ocean, we tend to get a bit complacent because we don't have the bushfire conditions, but they return and we can't always predict when they're going to return. It's predicted that we're going to be heading into another really dangerous set of circumstances more next year than this year. But even so, during the lull in the Enso cycle and various other cycles besides, we tend to get a bit complacent because we don't have fires. But what's happening during that period is that the fuel load is building up because of good rain and good conditions for growth. And if we don't control those fuel loads, we end up on hot days with dry conditions, situation where we can have catastrophic bushfires.
And this week there was a new report that came out saying that there's almost 7 million Aussies at risk of bushfires that could be as severe as those deadly LA fires last year, due to sharing the same kind of dangerous characteristics. What do we have in common that puts us at that risk?
The conditions with LA is one of the major things is that we share a lot of eucalypts. And the irony is that in the 1800s, we exported our eucalypts to both California and the Iberian Peninsula, Portugal, for the production of eucalypt oil. And as a consequence, they've grown out of control as weeds in California as an introduced species. And those eucalypt forests are full of oil and they're flammable. The other thing is that we're consistently building communities close to the peri-urban fringe, which is where suburbia butts up against natural woodland. And as a consequence of that, we also have, and this is debated in the literature, the idea that we're more likely to have arsonists operating at the peri-urban fringe because of various socio-demographic characteristics.
And we'll touch on arson in a little bit, but the thought of being at risk of that level of fire like we do see in LA is quite concerning because often those are dubbed mega fires and they're the kind of level fires we saw during, say, Black Summer in Australia. Can you explain how they differ to a regular bushfire?
Mega fires have been a concept which has emerged over the past 10 years as fires have become bigger and more ferocious under climatic conditions due to climate change, where the fires are coming together and creating their own weather. What happened with the Black Summer fires in the very early stages of, it was as early as August and September that the fires began, and those fires in Black Summer were originally started in Queensland by arson. But as they grew bigger and they began to join up, they created their own weather conditions and started to create dry lightning. And as a consequence of that, the fires that were then relit or continued to the ignition spots were more likely to be dry lightning due to the megafires themselves rather than ignition from arson.
And you have written about this and you've touched on it just briefly then, but how does climate change then act as a supercharger to all of this?
Well, the Black Summer fires were indeed unprecedented. That was wholly due to climate change. There was a world attribution study that was done very quickly after the event, and the calculations that were made were that the three climate drivers that came together and converged in creating such catastrophic conditions for Black Summer, 30% were attributable to climate change. I did some calculations prior to that study and I came up with about 16%, but that was using less sophisticated modelling and data that was publicly available that would be easily calculated by anybody. So 1/3 of those megafires were due to climate change, increasing in temperature. We had already hit an increase of 1.5 degrees on top of the natural temperatures that we would see seasonally in Australia. But the other components were 3 climate drivers all coming together. That was the Indian Ocean dipole, the El Nino and La Nina southern oscillation, and a third one which I can't quite recall right now.
And so we have these catastrophic conditions and climate change, and you also talked a little bit earlier about our other man-made concern. How much does arson play a role in the fires that we see nationwide?
Right. Well, that's a big question, and people will be surprised to know that, and it's probably increased since this data was collected, but we know that a very small percentage is caused by lightning and natural sources of ignition. A full 85% have human origins. And we have about 60,000 bushfires in Australia every year. But 13% are confirmed arson after a court of law has designated it arson, and up to 50% are suspected arson. So that means that up to 30,000 bushfires per year are suspected arson.
That's a significant amount. And do we know why people commit arson and who the most likely offenders often are?
Yes, we do. The problem is that traditionally the profile of an arsonist was that they were versatile criminals, fairly violent, usually drug affected, and of very low IQ. But they're only the ones we catch. There are other studies that have looked at self-reported arson, and that shows that they can be more intelligent and a little more nuanced and interesting as a profile. We know that 50% of all arson cases are carried out by children below the ages of 21. However, that doesn't mean that they're the most malicious, because the age crime curve, where crimes of all types peak around about the ages of 15 to 21, happens in arson and bushfire, as well as just about every other crime you can think of. So it's normal kind of developmental trajectory. What we have amongst that group is 4 subtypes among the children. One is often autism and developmental disorder. Another is a cry for help because of sexual abuse and neglect. Another is normal fire play that has just got out of control and they didn't mean to do it. In fact, all 3 of those have good reasons why they should not be sent to the judicial system, but rather the health system. But the 4th type is true conduct disorder. Young people who will grow up probably to have all the hallmarks of psychopathy and antisocial personality disorder and really do want to cause damage. What we're really worried about is yes, of course, we need to stop the children from lighting fires, but the ones that are truly malicious, and this is only a source of research that is in development now, is the older arsonists, such as Brendan Sokolow and various other individuals who, as they get older, usually around about the age of 40 and beyond, they start lighting fires preferentially on hot days and closer to communities. See, if you look at children, they light fires at all times of the day and night, all times of the seasons. It doesn't matter whether it's winter, spring. It's not really targeted. But as the arsonists become much older, they become targeted, and they're lighting fires on catastrophic days like today and closer to communities to do maximum damage.
And arson-related bushfires are quite often the source of intense debates, fueled by media personalities, politicians and people on social media who actually use the arson and man-made fire statistics as a way to kind of dispute climate change's role in bushfires. What do you say to that?
I am absolutely disgusted when I'm confronted with that sort of weaponization of information. Sometimes it happens because people want to push the youth crime agenda. Other times it's the argument goes, and this happened during the Black Summer bushfires. I won't even bother to name them, but various right-wing commentators said, if it's arson, then it cannot be climate change. The thing is that, yes, arson might create the initial ignition, but it is the climate change superimposed over the top that lets those fires get away and develop into mega fires, which are absolutely lethal, not only to communities, human communities, but also to wildlife, and of course, rippling through economies, through insurance systems and various others.
Dr. Reid, appreciate your insight. Thank you so much for joining me on the briefing today.
It's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you very much, Tara.
That was Dr. Paul Reid, and that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. We'll be back in your feed tomorrow morning with the weekend briefing. Antoinette Lattouf speaks with filmmaker Rachel Perkins about her latest project exploring the truth about the bloody battles fought to establish the nation.
There were violence, conflicts everywhere that land was occupied. Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islanders resisted that occupation of their country, and violence then ensued. Sometimes we call it frontier warfare. Some people call it occupation, others call it invasion.
If you want more, don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Tara Cassidy. Thanks for listening.